सिन्दूरारुणविग्रहां त्रिनयनां माणिक्यमौलिस्फुरत्तारानायकशेखरां स्मितमुखीमापीनवक्षोरुहां पाणिभ्यां मलिपूर्णरत्नचषकं रक्तोत्पलं बिभ्रतीं सौम्यां रत्नघटस्थरक्तचरणां ध्यायेत् परामम्बिकाम्। ॐ ध्यायेन्नित्यं महेशं रजतगिरिनिभं चारुचन्द्रावतंसं रत्नाकल्पोज्ज्वलाङ्गं परशुमृगवराभीतिहस्तं प्रसन्नं पद्मासीनं समन्तात् स्तुतममरगणैः व्याघ्रकृत्तिं वसानं विश्वाद्यं विश्वबीजं निखिलभयहरं पञ्चवक्त्रं त्रिनेत्रम्। ॐ नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। ॐ गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करम्। ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्ससुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत्।
धृतराष्ट्र उवाच धर्मक्षेत्रे कुरुक्षेत्रे समवेतायुयुत्सवः मामका पाण्डवाश्चैव किमकुर्वत सञ्जय। श्रीभगवानुवाच क्लैब्यं मास्मगमः पार्थ नेतत्त्वयुपपद्यते क्षुद्रं हृदय दौर्बल्यं त्यक्त्योत्तिष्ठ परन्तप कर्मणेव हि संसिद्धि मा स्थिता जनकादय लोकसंग्रहमेवापि सम्पश्यन् कर्तुमर्हसि प्रकृतिः क्रियमाणानि गुणैः कर्माणि सर्वशः अहंकार विमूढात्मा कर्ता अहमिति मन्यते इन्द्रियस्यार्थे रागद्वेषौ व्यवस्थितौ तयोर्न वशमागच्छेतौ रस्य परिपन्थिनौ। अर्जुन उवाच अथ केन प्रयुक्तोऽयं पापं चरति पूरुषः अनिच्छन्नपि वार्ष्णेय बलादिव नियोजितः। श्रीभगवानुवाच काम एष क्रोध एष रजोगुणसमुद्भवः महाशनो महापाप्मा विद्धेनम् इह वैरिणम् धूमेनाव्रियतेर्वह्निर्यथादर्शो मलेन च यथो बलेनावृतो गर्भः तथा तेनेदमावृतम् तस्मात् त्वम् इन्द्रियाण्याहुः नियम्य भरतर्षभ पाप्मानं प्रजहीयेनं ज्ञानविज्ञाननाशनम् इन्द्रियाणि परण्याहुः इन्द्रियेभ्यः परं मनः मनसस्तु परा बुद्धिः यो बुद्धेः परतस्तु सः एवं बुद्धेः परं बुद्ध्वा संस्तभ्यात्मात्मना जहि शत्रुं महाबाहो कामरूपं दुरासदम्.
Very nice. Acha. So, where were we?
So we're on 13th shloka, Professor. Fifth chapter. We did 12. We have to start from 13.
Oh, right. Yes.
You ended on a suspense there.
Oh, right, right. Right.
13th we did actually. 14th we have to start.
14th. Right, right. Let me just do one thing here. I have to turn off these notifications, otherwise it keeps beeping. Just a second. Do not disturb. Okay. Namaste, everyone. So we'll resume our discussion here. So let us just read 13 again, so that we can to recollect the context. Chapter started with Arjuna asking Bhagavan again that sometime you praise the renunciation of works and then you praise the performance of works. Can you please tell me for certain which of these two is better? So this is the context. Just 1 second. Tend to one point here and then I just want to make sure Shivani is able to enable my mother to connect if she wants to connect. Just see where she is. Hey Shivani. I don't know if Party wanted to connect to the class. Would you mind helping her?
Oh yeah, sure. I'll do
Thank you. So yes, so Bhagavan asked this question. Arjuna asked this question: which one is better? And so Bhagavan answers that of the two, definitely both of them promote the supreme good, but of the two, Karma Yoga is superior to the renunciation of works. And as I said, gauging the state of the mind of the questioner, Bhagavan is giving the advice appropriately. As I said, if the situation had been that in chapter 2 itself, Arjun had said, you are right, this is the truth, then the Bhagavad Gita would have ended in very few verses, and we would not have got all the complete transmission. But because Arjun persists in asking this question, so Bhagavan feels he has to explain at different levels. So now he's explaining at the Karma Yoga level. So he says that the one is a perpetual renouncer who neither shuns nor seeks, na dveshti na kankshati, nirdvandvo hi mahabaho sukham bandhat pramuchyate, etc. Then he goes on to point why those who see the Sankhya and Karma Yoga as different is not a correct perception. He says that is the Bala, the children's viewpoint, but the Pandit, not of the wise. They know that these two paths are properly leading to the same end, and properly resorting to them, one means the fruit of both. Status of one by the Sankhyas is attained by the yogis also. Only he perceives, who perceives that Sankhya and Yoga are one. And then he goes on to point how sannyasa is difficult to attain without being having yoked in Karma Yoga, etc. And I think I gave you some context about this last time. How should one perform works? That is given in 7. Yoga yukto vishuddhatma vijitatma jitendriya sarva bhuta atma bhutatma kurvannapi na lipyate. So work performed with this attitude, established in yoga, mind purified, self and senses controlled, his self becomes the self of all living beings. He is not tainted though he works. And undoubtedly a high ideal expressed in 8 and 9. Na eva kinchit karomi iti. Thinking, knowing the truth and thinking I work not at all, this sage works in the following way: seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, walking, sleeping, breathing, talking, evacuating, grasping, opening, closing the eyes, knowing that the senses operate vis-a-vis their objects. So, if one resorts to the wisdom, I believe we've already discussed in the 3rd chapter. Pranav just read, you read Prakritehe Kriyamani, right? Gunaihi Karmani Sarvasha. In the recitation, we had that verse, right? So, verse 9 makes sense, 8 and 9, if one recognizes the truth of that. It is only Prakriti that is the doer, and the gunas operate with the gunas. Senses operating with sense objects is gunas playing with the gunas. So this is not contradictory, 8 and 9. What is the challenge? The challenge is keeping that upmost in the mind at all times, right? The mind slips away quickly, and that is expressed also in that verse, which I said, Indriyanam hi charatam yanmano anuvidiyate tadasya pragyam harati vayur nava ivam bhasi. That prajna state, which is attained in meditation, is easily lost when the mind enters the sense world. Right?
Yeah.
So it is not contradictory in the sense, this is a high ideal, it's the ideal attained by those who are the siddhas, but nevertheless, once the mind enters the sense world, it requires, in the initial stages, considerable effort to maintain this equanimity, sense of wisdom. So, Brahmanyadhaya karmani sangam tyaktva karotiyah lipyate nasapapena padmapatram iva ambasa. Just as lotus leaf is not touched by water, reposing all works in Brahman, he operates without attachment. And this works steadily. You know, if every day you say karmanye vadikaraste, every day you say brahmarpanam, and that attitude permeates into the mind, over time, it has an effect. You know, so depending on how one says it, if one says it first, you learn to say it with the correct ucharana, then you learn the meaning of it, then that very meaning permeates your thinking, right? Then steadily, when that is practiced over a long period of time, it will turn the mind. The mind definitely starts moving in the direction that is pointed to as the highest ideal in these verses. And very similar to that, Kayena Manasa Buddhya Kevalair Indriyairapi Yoginah Karma Kurvanti Sangam Tyaktva Atma Shuddhaye. Mainly for the purification of the mind. With body, mind, intellect, and mere senses, perform work without attachment. Again, what seems like a faraway ideal in the beginning, when by the gentle repetition, will start to become closer and closer in time. युक्तः कर्मफलं त्यक्त्वा शान्तिमाप्नोति नैष्ठिकीम् अयुक्तः कामकारेण फले सक्तो निबध्यते. So attached one, ayuktah, on account of cravings, is bound. Yuktah, the one who is yoked, integrated, karma phalam tyaktva, giving up fruits of works, shanti mapnoti, naishtikim, disciplined peace. So then we come to 13. Sarva karmani manasa sanyasyaste sukham vashi navadvare pure dehi naiva kurvanna karayan. Mentally renouncing all works and self-control, the embodied one happily sits in the nine-gated city, neither working nor causing others to work. This same sense is expressed in the Mundaka Upanishad. Dva suparna sayuja sakhaya samanam vriksham parishasvajate tayoho ranyoho pippalam swadvat yanashnan anyoho abhichakashiti. Two birds, golden birds, Dva Suparna, Sayuja Sakhaya. They are together sitting. They are friends. Samanam Vriksham, on the same tree they are sitting. Of them, one eats the fruits, sweet and bitter. The other one, without eating, is merely looking on. So this other one, merely looking on, is the one attained by the Sarva Karmani Manasa Sanyasyaste Sukham Vashi. Sitting in that same, the nine-gated city is the tree of the Mundaka Upanishad, right? That is the true self. So, okay, next, why is this? And now Bhagavan explains that what is the distinction between those two birds? Why does one taste the fruits and the other not? So his state is the onlooker, right? And now he clarifies many things. This doubt that arises, right? Who is this inner controller? Antaryami, we say. And Bhagavan clarifies these points, that our true nature is of the same nature. Na kartrutvam na karmani lokasya srijati prabhu na karma phala samyogam swabhavastu pravartate. This is a very important verse. The Lord creates neither agency, kartrutvam, or doership, na karmani lokasya srijati prabhu. He does not create works also for the world. Na karma phala samyogam, or not even the attachment to the works. Swabhavastu pravartati. It is only swabhav that operates. What is the swabhav? This swabhav is the prakriti, born of the gunas. And because the gunas always operate in triad, sattva, rajas, tamas, as long as there is that trace of rajas and tamas, it is natural that looking through the body, the mind will get deluded, attached in proportion to the rajotamas present in it. And so, although the Lord does not create the works or the agency, as I said, the deepest insight is that nothing is happening. Nothing has happened from the beginning of time. But yet, it seems very real, everything. And the reason is because of the trace rajotamas that persists. That creates the sense of agency, because through the ahankar, remember, mind has four functions: manas, buddhi, chitta, ahankar. And again in that other verse it said, ahankara vimudhatma karta ahamiti manyate. Right? So two ways that people, first the devout will say, encourage humility. So if something is done, one says, oh, okay, it is the Lord operating through me, right? That is in a limited way correct. But yet the deeper understanding is 14, right? We may say it is the grace of the Lord through which certain things seem to happen. But 14 is absolutely correct. Bhagavan says that doership nor objects nor the works does the Lord create. Not even the connection with the works. But the nature of this prakriti, this swabhav, this triguna shakti is such that all this seems to be happening. But in reality, so now Bhagavan is encouraging Arjuna to transcend the duality, transcend this, get beyond this virtue and vice. Don't think punya pap. Yes, that is correct at a certain level of thinking. Now you must know the truth. Nadatte kasyachit papam nachaiva sukrutam vibhuhu ajnanenavritam jnanam tena mukhyanti jantavaha. The Lord does not accept anybody's sin or your merit. Knowledge is shrouded in ignorance, therefore living beings are deluded. So if you go about thinking, oh, I have done so much great punyas, it is irrelevant to the Lord. If you go about thinking, I have done so much pap, that is also irrelevant to the Lord. These are useful only as insofar as the human being is concerned about rising up to Swarga as a jiva and getting flung down on earth again. If one's entire transit is confined to Bhur Bhuva Suva, yes, you must worry about Punya and Pap, right? But that is an eternal cycle out of which there is no escape, unless one resorts to knowledge. Unless Brahma Jignasa arises, that cycle will be perpetuated for eternity. And the very purpose of the human birth is to get a chance to be rid of that cycle. So one must understand, how is the Lord saying this? What does the Lord mean when he says that he does not create agency? How is this Lord the one who is neither accepting? Why was this great fantasy created of punya pap? And then again, the third part of this is ajnanena avritam jnanam. Same point he said. In the other verse, which Pranav just read. How did that go? Kamesha krodesha rajoguna samudbha mahasharo mahapapman jnanina nitya vairinam. And then the next one, dhumrena avriyate vaknihi, right? Or analaha. Dhumrena avriyate analaha. Yatha darshena malena cha. Just as mirror is covered by dirt, smoke envelops fire. Yatholbena avrato garbhaha. Embryo is covered by the amnion. In that way, the truth sitting, staring right in front of us in the face is veiled by karma. The truth is around us at all times, at every instant, and yet it does not seem accessible, right? It cannot be that the truth is suddenly revealed one day. If it is true, it is eternal. That means it must be there all the time. It must have been in the 5 minutes before Gita class started. It must be here right now. It will be after we finish Gita class. It existed before we were born, and it's going to exist even after this body is dropped, right? Even after the perceptions in this physical world cease, the truth cannot cease, right? What do you say? So that truth must be known. And it is shrouded in ignorance. So the first step must be to rid oneself of that ignorance. This is our Bhagavan Shankaracharya's Upadesham also. So then what is that state? Very nicely it is reading to the next verse. Random rambling sometimes also leads to the shows a connection. Here we go. Number 16. Jnanena tu tad ajnanam yesham nashitam atmanah tesham adityavat jnanam prakashayati tatparam. For them whose ignorance has been destroyed by knowledge. Yesham tad ajnanam nashitam. That's the one construction. For them whose that ignorance has been destroyed. How? Jnanena. Instrumental case. By knowledge. Only thing that can destroy ignorance is knowledge. Not pilgrimages to holy places, not the tapas even, nor millions of good works, digging wells, giving dhanam, recitation of countless shlokas, mantras. All these are good. They purify the mind, they prepare the mind. But until the mind hears the knowledge, contemplates on the knowledge, and becomes illuminated completely by the knowledge at all times, until that point, that ignorance will not be destroyed. And all that is said here will seem plausible, something one can have faith in, but may not become instantly apparent. So the goal is to reach that point where it becomes instantly and obviously clear. Therefore, those whose ignorance has been destroyed, what happens? What is their state? Tesham adityavat, just like the sun, jnanam, that knowledge, prakashayati, it illuminates, tatparam, the supreme reality. And therefore, when with that mind one looks at anything, world or otherwise, the truth is apparent. That truth, supreme truth, beyond, illumined by knowledge, is further characterized. What is this? Param paramartha tattvam jnana prakashitam. What is that? Tad buddhaya tad atmanah tannishta tat parayanaha gacchanti apunaravrittim jnana nirdhuta kalmashaha. Gacchanti apunaravrittim, not to return, right? Jnana nirdhuta kalmashaha, those whose sins, kalmasha, have been removed by knowledge. Dhuta kalmashaha, rendered to dust literally. Nirdhuta, so with the intellect set on it as the self, tad buddhaya tad atmanaha, perceiving it as the self, tan nishtha, tat praya, devoted to it, it being the supreme abode. The sages gacchanti. So gacchanti is the sages has to be supplied there. Gacchanti. Proceed to the status whence there is no return. Apunaravrittim. Tadeva param ayanam paragatihi yesham bhavati te tatparayana. Kevala atmarataya ityarthaha te gacchanti. Yesham jnanena nashitam atmanah ajnanam te gacchanti. Evam vidaha apunaravrittim. Apunah deha sambandham ज्ञान निर्धूत कल्मषः यथोक्तेन ज्ञानेन निर्धूतः निहतः नाशितः कल्मषः पापादि संसार कारण दोषः येषां ते ज्ञान निर्धूत कल्मषाः यतयः इत्यर्थः. Knowledge has destroyed the flaw, the sins, etc., that engender the transmigratory life. The connection to the body, deha sambandham, and the papadi samsara karana dosha, those which are the cause of entrapment in the cycle of samsara. So this apunaravritim, you see, if at the time of the pranas leaving the body, if the pranas depart in the city of 9 gates by any of the routes of the senses, then the mind leaves with the pranas and undertakes the southern path, reaches the abode of the Pitras in 1 year, and thereafter, after due course of time, depending on the balance of Papa Punya, is elevated to Swargalok and then demoted back depending on that. So what this means is that whatever thoughts, the Pitras are also thoughts in our minds. They are long-term tendencies in our minds. And as long as those tendencies or vasanas, samskaras remain, then this sort of, there will either be enjoyment of the senses most beautifully like in Swargalok, or there can also be experience of extreme pain and suffering, which is the characteristic of the 7 lokas below Bhulok. Either of those is possible. And neither of those being permanent is not desirable. But if at the time of the pranas leaving the body, we are given an innings, right? Just like in cricket, you're given one innings, human innings. In that innings, you must score the century or whatever, so that at the time when you get out, you should know how to leave, in what way to leave, right? And the one northern path of leaving, which is through the Brahmarandra, that path is the path of no return. Those who take that path do not return again to this cycle. This world is so entrancing, so engrossing, so consuming in its fascinating variety that it's hard to conceive of those things even, but they are true. You know, great Bhishma of the Mahabharata, he waited until the Uttarayan and gave up his pranas at the right time, so that he wanted to reach the abode of Krishna and the place of non-return, right? So therefore, this is what Bhagavan is saying. How is it that they reach that place of, take the route of non-return? So Bhagavan Shankaracharya says, Yesham jnanena nashitam atmanah ajnanam te panditaha katham tattvam pashyanti iti. So what is this truth that they see? How do the sages whose ignorance of the self has been destroyed by knowledge perceive the truth? Uchyate. Answer. Vidya vinaya sampanne brahmane gavihastini shuni chaiva shwapa kecha panditaha samadarshinaha. Vidya vinaya sampanne. Brahmane. In a Brahmin who is well endowed with vidya, knowledge, vinaya, humility, or in this case, culture, translated as. In an elephant, Gavi, in a cow, Hastini, I'm jumping ahead mentally. Hastini in an elephant, Shuni in a dog, Chaiva Swapa Kecha, and dog-eating outcast. Panditaha Samadarshana, they see the same. Why is that? Because all these are composed of the 3 gunas only. The relative proportion of the gunas has determined the different outcomes. And so therefore, just like if you look at the variety of colors in the universe, if they are all composed of RGB, if you only see RGB in all of them, then there is no nice color and there is no dirty color, right?
Right.
The associations of beautiful color and dirty color sees if one lens only sees RGB all the time, right? So similarly, they see no difference.
Dr. Shankar, I have a quick question on this.
Surely.
So the Bhagavan mentions, the cow, elephant, and dog. So is there purpose like the cow? So somewhere in the commentary, Shankaracharya says about Sattva and Rajas, so like probably cow as a Rajas symbol, and then elephant as a Tamas, and then dog also there. So what is the significance of that? I was wondering.
Right. So as I said, the showing that the relative proportion of RGB or Sattva, Rajas, Tamas is different in each of these, right? So in the Sattvic Brahman, there is the highest proportion, you may say, of Sattva, right? Actually, the cow, I would say within, he says in an interview, like the cow that is Rajasic without such an impression. So it says, Uttama samskaravati brahmane satvike, highest samskar. Madhyamayam cha rajasyam gavi, samskarahinayam atyantameva kevala tamase hastyado. Sattvadigунैः tajjaischa samskaraihi. The sages are trained to see the same single and immutable Brahman, wholly unaffected by constituents like the sattva and by the latent impressions they create. Does that? These are merely examples he's giving.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
So we may be usually, you may be attracted to a Brahmin well-versed in the Vedas and humble. Is a very pleasant experience, right, to encounter. A cow also is a very pleasant thing to encounter. Elephant depends on its mood, right? And dog, in the historical context of the Vedic thing, dog is not considered, it's considered an unclean animal, very difficult nowadays. Everybody has a dog in the house. Of course, they're affectionate creatures, but they were not considered to be very worthy of as keeping like pets and things like that in the old days. And the eater of dog meat, of course, is considered even today, considered a dog eating outcast, he says, right? And how to see, is it possible that somebody can view all these as the same, right? Is it possible that one is not disgusted or at the same time attracted towards one or the other? That is the viewpoint. That's Samyak Darshana. So what is this fantastic ideal state, seemingly so far away? So he says, the lead into the next verse is, Nanu abodhyanaha te doshavantaha samassamabhyam vishamasame pujataha iti smritehe. Na te doshavantaha. So what is GDS? Something from Grihya Sutras. I want to check this abbreviation. GDS, Gautama Dharma Sutra. So in Gautama Dharma Sutra, the food should not be accepted from him who invidiously treats equals as unequals and unequals as equals. So this was a very important point, because you see, one can argue that, sir, you are saying dog is unclean, etc. But now, today's world, everybody is keeping a dog as a pet. They must be Samyak Darshanas, right? They don't see any taint in the dog, right? How to reconcile? And yet, after all, Bhagavan has said, that the one who has seen this, and now you have the Smriti saying something contrary. It says food should not be accepted from him who invidiously treats equals as unequals and unequals as equals. So what is this contradiction? So the answer he gives, Katham. No, they are not tainted. How? Nate doshamanta. Ihaiva tairjitah sargo yesham samye sthitam manaha nirdosham hi samam brahma tasmat brahmani te sthitaha. So this is a state that is difficult to encounter in people, and unusual may be their behavior. And of course, that behavior has to be examined over a long period of time so as to be convinced of it. One may say that the great gurus, like Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharishi, Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna, and Shankaracharya, they embodied this, right? In them, this viewpoint can be seen, and they are not tainted by, because they have transcended the rules of the Gautama Dharma Sutra itself. Those rules are important. They are intended for the mind that has not completely transcended that at all times. So that Smriti has its purpose, it has its value, but that Smriti cannot be applied as a yardstick to the one who has attained this viewpoint. Iha eva, in this birth itself, even here, tair jitaha, by them is overcome, vanquished. Yesham samye sthitam mana, for whom the mind abides in equality. Nirdosham hi samam brahma, flawless indeed. There is no dosh in Brahman. Tasmat brahmani te, and they abide in Brahman. So in that sense, they are also flawless. It may be difficult to understand their behavior, to explain some of their actions, but when observed over the entirety of their life, the wisdom of their vision and the peace that they embody will cast all doubts aside. That is the import here. Birth is vanquished even here while yet alive. This is the status of the Jivan Muktas. So, the next verse, 20. Na prahrishyet priyam prapya na dvijet no dvijet prapya chapriyam sthira buddhir asammudho brahmavit brahmani sthitah na prahrishyet priyam prapya, does not delight on seeing the pleasant thing, like the Brahman, like the Brahmana, who is well versed in Vedas and humble. Na udvijet, does not get disturbed or upset. Prapya chapriyam, on meeting something that is unpleasant, such as the dog or the dog eating outcast, etc. Sthira buddhir asammudho, always steady in the intellect, undeluded. Asammudho. Brahmavit brahmani sthitaha, one knowing Brahman and abiding in Brahman. Na prahrishyet iti. Kimcha brahmani sthitaha. Moreover, abiding in Brahman. So again, describing the nature. Bahyasparsheshu asaktatma vindayatmani yatsukham vindatyatmani yatsukham sa brahma yoga yuktatma sukham akshayam ashnute. So bahya, external, sparsheshu, in the external senses, asaktatma, unattached to those, vindati, attains, atmani yat sukham, in the self whatever bliss, sa brahma yoga yuktatma, united with the eternal, sukham akshayam asnute, inexhaustible bliss he enjoys. So this is obviously the path also described in the Yoga Sutra. Bahya sparsheshu asaktatma vindati atmani yat sukham sa brahma yoga yuktatma sukham akshayam ashnute. The other pleasures of the the pleasure and pain dualities is not the same qualitatively as the sukham that is described here. Although the word is the same, anandam, brahmanandam is also the sense meant when sukha is said here, because it's qualified by saying it is unattached to the externals, to the external objects. So next verse. Yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukkhayonaya evate adyantavantah kaunteya na teshu ramate buddha. This is again very, very good verse, very powerful verse worth memorizing, which will stick in the mind. This is something also I wanted to suggest to each of you as a personal exercise, is to identify the verse that speaks to you the most. We have read many verses now, chapter 5 up to that. That is most important. I do not advocate memorizing a verse just because even I have recommended. The meaning of the verse should speak to you at a very deeply personal level. That verse is worth memorizing, right? And that verse should be memorized and then brought into one's practice, recollected at various times. That is the power. Memorizing the entire Bhagavad Gita is not the path for the wise and the advanced. Sri Ramakrishna had a very beautiful way of putting it. He said, once you have memorized the shopping list, you throw the shopping list away. You're not going to say, oh, tomato, potato, tomato, potato, tomato, potato. You have to buy tomatoes and potatoes. You can put that in your head and forget the list, right? So if the truth is simple, it doesn't need 10,000 verses to tell you the truth. The truth is so simple, it doesn't even need one verse. It needs only half a verse, right? As Bhagavan Sri Shankaracharya has shown. So the spirit should be economy, focus, and use the verse. Simply memorizing the verse just for the sake of a pride, oh, I won some prize in Gita class. Yeah, this is the children, that's fine. There is a stage for that. But the goal should be to move beyond that stage, because life is short. How many more breaths are left in this body, we don't know. Right? So when we are reading, the purpose of reading Gita is to understand. And once we understand, there must be the discrimination to pick which verse is the gem that really speaks to me at the sadhana, at this point, which is the one that is giving that penetrating laser-like insight. Then let me keep that verse in my mind. This is one such verse. Yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukkha yonaya evate adyantavantah kaunteya na teshu ramate buddha. Yehi samsparshaja bhoga, those which are born of contacts with the touching, meaning that the senses touching the sense objects, all the senses, 5 of them, enjoyments born of objective contacts. Dukkha yonaya evate, they are actually the womb of sorrow. The womb of sorrow. Dukkha yonaya evate. Adyantavantaha, they come and go. Adi, they have a birth and they have an end. Kaunteya, O son of Kunti, na teshu ramate buddha, the wise do not delight in them. This is a very powerful verse, very difficult to internalize, very difficult to practice. So everything that we enjoy, this is a highest vairagyam he is advocating, right? So let us see what Bhagavan Shankaracharya says. Only the extremely deluded souls are observed to delight in objects as beasts, etc. Atyanta mudhanam eva hi vishayeshu ratihi drishyate yatha pashu prabrutinam. Okay. Ayam cha shreyo marga pratipakshi kashtatamaha doshaha sarva sarvanartha prapti hetuhu dur nivarascha iti tat parihare yatnadhikyam kartavyam iti aha bhagavan. Therefore, great effort must be made to avoid it. This is the most disastrous impediment in the path to the supreme good. Then 23. Shaknoti haiva yah sodhum praksharira vimokshanat kama krodhodbhavam vegam sayuktah sa sukhinarah shaknoti iha eva yah. Who is capable here itself, in this birth itself? Sodhum prak sharira vimokshanat, before the fall of the body. Kama krodod bhavam vegam, the momentum that is caused by lust and anger. Sayuktaha, sasukhi. So the nature of the both these characteristics, Kama and Krodha, is they disturb the pranas. And so they have a certain momentum or a charge. And the nature of that momentum is to disintegrate the inner peace. Right? So the one who is strong enough to resist in this world before the fall of his body, the urge of lust and wrath is integrated. He is happy. And this practice is done in steps, baby steps, small steps, right? And progressively, it is accomplished. Not all at once. But Bhagavan is pointing out how even a small victory in that sphere is going to lead to greater victories. And undoubtedly, the practice of Hatha Yoga and practice of Raja Yoga are very powerful in teaching us the control of the pranas. First, one must be aware of the prana, then pranayama, which in turn leads to pratyahara, which again is the import of verse 22. Because starting with yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara. Pratyahara is the withdrawal of the mind from the senses, conquering that, bringing the senses under one's control. And that is most easily accomplished when before that yama, niyama, asana and pranayama practiced. Because through the regulation of the flow of the prana, the mind is regulated. And without regulation of the mind, nothing that is given in the Bhagavad Gita can be attained. Regulation of the mind is crucial. And the main mechanism that the yogis identified and gave to us as rishis, blessed us with, such as Patanjali Maharishi, was that the simple method of controlling breath control controls the flow of the pranic energy, which controls the mind. So if that can be mastered, experienced, then slowly the mind at least once can come under control. Once it comes under control, once it experiences the inner peace, knows its true nature, glimpses the true nature once, then the next time, although there are vasanas, they may not be exhausted, but the next time it is aware, it's more aware when it comes out. So in a practical sense, you take somebody who's trying to learn a skill in the world. Let us forget all this abstract stuff. You take a student, okay? What are the two characteristics a student needs? A student needs to have an input channel, okay? There are some students, how many other times you tell them, there's no input channel. They have ears, They have ears, definitely, the ears function, but the mind is not receptive to the input. So such people, we say the input channel is blocked, right? So first of all, the mind has to open its input channel. Second thing, I may take the input, but if I don't have the capability to process and modify behavior, this is a learning module, right? We talk about this learning remotes, and nowadays even electronics can learn stuff, right? Data science, machine learning. So what you do, neural networks, you train a data set. On one data set, it's presented with the new data, and it has established a pattern. I mean, if even an idiotic computer can do it, you think the human mind cannot do it? And are we descended so much lower than the computer that we cannot learn? That sounds ridiculous, right? The brain, studies of the brain tell us it is neuroplastic. It is capable of making new synaptic connections and actually even modifying the physiological, anatomical characteristics of the brain through training. The kind of waves that show up on the EEGs change through meditation. The quantity of the various parts like the prefrontal cortex, etc., are modified either through biochemically or through the practice of meditation, right? And so the learning module has to be there. If either of these is broken, if either one cannot take input, listen, or if one cannot process the input, that human being cannot gain from the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, forget the Bhagavad Gita, that human being finds it difficult to progress even in the world, physical world. Because as a student, if one is receptive to what the teacher is saying, the instruction, and one is willing to learn and modify, transform the behavior based on the instruction, only then is progress made. That student is, everybody says, oh, very brilliant, very intelligent, very amazing, right? But the student who doesn't listen at all, well, I mean, we all know those. You've all probably been TA at some point. You just have to say, live long and prosper and move on. That the module is not open. At least from you, it cannot come. Life experience, engaging in the world, banging the head against other things, slowly, maybe at the end of many years, that our channel may open by God's grace. It may not also. The one who listens, some people will nod their head. There are other second classes, they'll nod their head. Oh, yes, completely correct. What you said is so right. But the next minute, there is no practice. There is no, the learning module is not strong enough. It is not engaging. It is not learning from the input. It is not examining. I'm making this set of mistakes. This input is telling me this. Every time I make the mistake, oh, I shouldn't have made that. What happened? An evaluation and then a correction. That process is very critical, is very crucial in all our life, whether it be learning in college or learning at work or learning at home, interactions with the family members, interactions with the world, social intelligence, emotional intelligence, academic intelligence. All these rely on input and learning together. And when those are very successful, then this process becomes very, very rapid. And the Bhagavan's light, Bhagavan's instruction, Bhagavan's knowledge, it becomes very rapidly like a catalyst. It immediately starts to transform one's thinking. And that is basically that buddhi, the sattvic buddhi, the part of the mental faculty of the four, ahankaram, chittam, manas, buddhi. When buddhi operates, it's able to tell manas, okay, control those external objects as they come in and go out. It's able to analyze the storehouse of memories and learn from them. And it's also able to recognize in what sense does this ego operate in the world? How does this ego allow the Sharira Yatra to be done successfully. So that is the idea here. And so Bhagavan is emphasizing this point in 23. So I think it's a good place to stop. A few minutes over, but I should definitely wait to take any questions or comments from all of you. And then we can continue in chapter 5. I think above all, the main thing I would say is, in the Gita, I notice many times this ideal state is often mentioned, but it should not create a sense that, oh, this is something very difficult, very far away. Yeah, of course it's difficult. There is nobody is saying that it's easy, but it should not be thought of as unattainable, or that it should more inspire that with practice, this instant today, the wisdom can be immediately absorbed, it will have an effect, and it will definitely generate the greatest good, not only for the aspirant, but all around, for those all around also. That is the power of the Gita, that is the power of the message. So, questions, comments?
Dr. Shankar,
Yes.
thank you so much for this enlightening. I mean, this was very powerful. Whatever you say last 5 minutes has been very powerful. And so you already answered some of the question I already had, like, memorizing the verses that touches you. I exactly had that question on my mind and you answered. So probably like a telepathy.
Yes, thank you, certainly. Yeah.
And
please.
So another question I have is, so it's like a protocol development for your own sake, right? Whole like a spiritual journey.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned that you have to develop your own protocol, and I wonder, from the grace of Guru,
mm-hmm.
if we are in touch with Guru. So my impression was, Guru reads the seeker's mind and he prescribed the certain protocol. But based on what you have been saying now, is that students also have to be agile, right, to learn and then modify accordingly, right?
Yes, definitely, because you can see that from experience, right? There are many great gurus. We have seen the 3 gurus. They came in contact with how many people? Think about it, right? How many people must have visited Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna, right?
Right, there were many.
Many. And some stand out in their, later they are the great disciples. They've written experience from their words and experiences. We can infer that they gained their gift that he was trying to give, right? But there are also numbers probably who did not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, that fault cannot be laid at the feet of Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna, right?
Yeah, I know, yes.
That would be unfair.
Yeah. So when I go through the gospel,
Yes.
I think so. At many points, he says that somebody is coming, right? So we already discussed this before, because of his because of his what is that called, guna, the supernatural power, right? He could know that who is very close to, who
Right.
can, to whom he can impart the knowledge so that his progress transforms, right? And some of the people he wouldn't like to touch as well. Like when you're gonna be dancing in samadhi, and then if somebody try to hold him or support, then you'd be mad. Yeah. So I see the activity. Sometimes when I read, okay, so that probably has profound impact. That's why he's trying to avoid, because he probably he couldn't do anything to those people.
Yeah, there. Each time and appropriate time is different. Each one's, right?
Right.
While undoubtedly the Lord does not play favorites, certainly the same grace is available to everyone. Whether one can get it or not is within each individual's um, capacity, right? According to their capacity. So we can try to only work on our capacity. Any other comments or questions?
Thank you.
I
Thank you.
have two questions.
Namaste. Yeah, namaste, Mahesh. Certainly.
Hello, Professor. I have two questions.
Surely.
One is in the verse, I think it was 40, that
Mhm.
Kartavyam na karmani lokasya srajati prabhu.
Right.
Prabhavastu pravartate. But I'm just like trying to understand that the Prakriti in itself is inert. Inert in a sense, maybe like that Chetan is because of the Brahman present in that. Otherwise, it has no sort of power. So how can Prakriti cause something like karma phala, or all that?
Yeah. Yeah, you're entering a technical point here, which is a good point. And Pranav is referring to this point that in the yoga philosophy, technically, if you look at it, it talks about Purusha and Prakriti as two operative principles. Purusha having the capacity, sentient capacity, and it is through the combination of the two that so-called world comes into being. But in that subtle sense, actually, yoga is superseded by Advaita. So the both intuitive understanding in meditation and also Advaita itself does not propose two principles. Advaita means there is only one principle. So in that sense, the yoga philosophy is a little inferior to the Advaita. The understanding which will help clarify maybe is that there is this one principle which we call Brahman because of its property of growing, right? This Brahman has a power, just like fire has a power to burn, and its power is Maya, which has the three constituents. So another way to think of it, think of a string and it's vibrating, right? The vibrating string has a property of appearing to be like a, if you hold it at two ends and you vibrate it, it will look like a, right? Like an envelope like this, right?
Right.
But it's only a string, right? It is its property of vibration that has given a rise to this shape. Right. Similarly, can we conceive of a uniform quantity, if you will, substance whose vibration can create the sense of the world, right? Within that, in that vibration is contained the mind. In that vibration is contained our individual minds, right? And through the power of that vibration is the veiling of the mind, and it's saying the projection on the screen of the world, right? But nevertheless, when now Yoga Sutra is a perfectly adequate philosophy to take you to a certain point, right? The concept of Purusha is very important. It is there in the mind and very clearly defined as the one, there is a special Purusha, Ishvara, who is not tainted by karma. Correct? So in that sense, it's a useful concept. Now, in order to explain in a very technical, philosophical way, in order to reconcile how can the world come about, the yogis or the Yoga Sutra or the yoga philosophy posited that there must be two things, one interacting with the other, right? Perfectly adequate insofar as yoga philosophy goes. But Bhagavan Sri Shankaracharya pointed out to us in the Upadesha Sahasri that first you must master Hatha Yoga, then Raja Yoga. And he says, but beyond that, it is undoubtedly the fundamental principles of Advaita that hold. And in that he says the Prasthanatrayi, of which Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Sutras are the 3 points of departure. Right? And in that we know again and again in all the Upanishads has been reiterated this point that one alone, right? And so remember that verse comes Ekoham Bahusyamaiti. Being one said, let me be many. How is that let me be many possible? Through the power. That Shakti. So hopefully, I don't know if it clarified.
Yes,
Did
I'll
I-
just one
huh?
comment. Yes, I think I confused the notion of Prakriti Purusha and the Brahman and Maya. I think I merged the two things, and especially I was not aware that Yoga Sutra considers them as two.
Yes.
Earlier I was perceiving that they are considering Purusha is present in Prakriti, but I think you clarified it. That analogy explained that vibration is just an apparent thing. It's the only that string is there, so there's no two. Thank you.
Namaste.
If you have time, I have just one more question.
Zarur.
So that is little different. In the last class, you ended on this note, right? That how Janaka he's in akarma, that is okay, but how he not engages others also. So that is 13th shloka. That na kurvan na karyeti, something like that.
Right. Sarva karmani manasa sanyasyaste sukham vashi navadvare pure dehi naiva kurvan na karayan. Right.
You gave us homework, like us to think about this thing, but
Right. So what was the result of the homework, if I may ask?
I thought about it also, and I asked few friends also that what
Uh-huh.
they think about it.
Yes.
I think, like, let's say an individual, because of their agyan, will be engaged in karma because they will be building their karma. So it's their own tendency. But for example, Janaka, he gave his like commander to lead the army. So Janaka is in akarma. So his effect on that person's action will be of akarma. Now, if that army journal associate his personal gains or his mind with it, then he will be building karma. But otherwise, Janaka is not causing anything for him.
Right. Indeed. Yes. The state of Janaka is being fully aware that it is the gunas that are working. Right. As long as Janaka inhabits a body, that body has some rajas and tamas. Right. So what the pranas do is they operate within the body and take the body to its logical end where it must meet the 5 elements. Right. So this way the rajas is working on the tamas, right, and producing a very sattvic sense in the mind, right, which is then perfectly illumined to direct all the activities, so to speak, in the external world. But his own mind having been so purified, it's like the lampshade which has no, not even a dot on it, is just illuminating everything around, right? And therefore he was, and we have seen this in so many stories, right? Like that Raikva of the one who rides a cart, or people in various stations of life whom we normally may not think are enlightened are frequently in the Upanishad shown to have perfect enlightenment, right? And stage of Jada Bharat also, when he's born again, lifting the king's um, palanquin, and he is abused, but then he suddenly speaks the highest words of wisdom, and then everybody realizes, yes, this is true. So in that sense, we can understand. Definitely, you're right. Yeah, it's the state of the mind.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I have a question, if you have time.
Surely.
When you're talking about creating this input channel with respect to sadhana,
Mhm.
did you have anything specific in mind that people who are beginning can do? Or was it just sincerity?
Pardon me? Or what about sincerity?
Was it just sincerity? I mean, is there something particular that we can develop to work on our input channel and likewise the processing module?
Very good question. Yes. So, I think it comes down to cultivating Shraddha first. And that very specific definition that Bhagavan Sri Shankaracharya gave in Tattva Bodh is Guru Vedanta Vakyadishu Vishwasa, right? How to build that faith in the words of the Guru and the words of Vedanta, right? Now, I was somehow blessed. I feel that from the time of my birth, I cannot remember a time when I did not have faith in the words of Bhagavan Sri Shankaracharya, Adi Shankaracharya. I cannot recollect a time. Everything I read about his life, it just amplifies and reaffirms the truth. Okay. Now that may not be everybody's experience, but having one such ideal or a source which you can trust without ever doubting, right? And I think the three gurus that I mentioned all have this characteristic. Bhagavan Sri Ramana also, Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna also. That which they have said, you cannot have doubting if you really think about it. Why? Because they reach the desireless state. They are not doing this for anything, for their own gain, right? That's the hallmark. Now, if one starts to have faith in that, then the input channel is really open, Then every time you read and listen or contemplate on what they have said, it's very powerful. Reading the charitra of these saints is also powerful because the more you read, you think about their life, that deepens the faith, right? So definitely reading the stories of the saints, their life and their writings is a very good way to build that Shraddha. That is the input channel. The cultivating the learning module. I think combination, one thing is daily sadhana, in which when you try to go through the practices of Hatha Yoga and Raja Yoga, every time we sit in dhyanam, every time we collect the mind, we go through asana, pranayam, pratyahar, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. You start with dharana. You begin to fix the mind on, let us say it is a savitarka with some object. The mind will wander in the beginning, right? And if one examines what it is wandering to, what is pushing this mind, observe that, right? That will give insight into where the learning module needs to operate. So let us say something upset you in the day and you sit in dhyanam in the evening, the mind does not want to focus on the object of meditation, but it is being displaced by something, right? When one gains the ability to take the observing aspect and say, what is this that is displacing in the course of the day? And then start to inquire, what can be done to stabilize the mind in the face of that disturbance next time, right? So that this is another very useful learning module, because that is teaching us from sense experience and world experience, what is the source of the disturbance, right? And how to bring the mind to the steady resting place in spite of it. I think these are probably effective ways to start with. Does that seem to make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So very good. So we'll say Shanti Mantram and then meet again next week. Okay. Very good. तच्छं योरावृणीमहे गातुं यज्ञाय गातुं यज्ञपतये दैवीः स्वस्तिरस्तु नः स्वस्तिर्मानुषेभ्यः ऊर्ध्वं जिगातु भेषजम् शन्नो अस्तु द्विपदेः शं चतुष्पदे ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
Any?